All right, what's up, everybody? Happy Monday. It is Labor Day, and I have a special guest today. I have Mr. Stephen Adkins, and I'm super excited. Although I will say this, the intro video, there's one part that I hope you were looking down at your phone and didn't see was the terrible drop kick.
Uh, Drop kicks are like a pet peeve of mine. Everybody throws them in every action movie. Every stunt coordinator feels like he has to make one in, and he always
Right.
gets a non-wrestling stunt guy to do a bad drop kick, and it just makes my skin crawl. And like the best action movie, a shitty drop kick. Oh, wait, I don't know if I can cuss on this.
It's fine. It's all good. Hey,
Okay.
so let me start this off with a quick intro to everybody that's watching. First of all, if you are watching right now live, please go ahead and share this out on Facebook so people can join in, ask questions. I know we're probably going to get some of our MPW students, wrestlers, friends that are joining in. I know Danny Devine will be watching this very
He
closely.
better.
Uh, he better, right? So, as I kind of briefly told you, Steve, at the beginning of this, my whole purpose for this podcast was that as I went through 2020 and scrolling through Facebook, and every time I turned around, something was negative, and I couldn't deal with that. So I asked myself for 2021, what can I do that will be positive, and what can I do that will be just a little bit more exciting? And I said, hey, I know a lot of people who are super motivational, super inspirational, and have accomplished some great things in their lives. Why don't we share that on Facebook instead of all the negativity? So I enlisted 52 guests, and the list is continuing to grow. And you were literally at the top of the list of one of the people that I wanted to get on the show. It took us a little longer because your work schedule is a little bit tight, but here we are, and I'm genuinely excited to be able to interview and introduce you to everybody out there on social media. So thanks for joining me.
Yes, I'm excited. And when you say stuff like that, like I always tell my wife, like there's a few guys I know that get it, that understand like what life's really about, and you're always on that list. Like you know the difference between talking to someone young and figuring their life out, or talking to you, or talking to Logan, or talking to like someone who knows their direction and knows what they're
Hmm.
doing. So you are a motivator just doing
Hmm.
this. You're motivating
Yeah.
me to like Flames out there doing his thing. I got to do things too. So thanks for
Yeah.
having
No,
me.
of course, absolutely. So we met. It's interesting that we met through the world of professional wrestling, and to kill a really long story, I wanted to do two things in my life. One was to teach martial arts and own a martial arts school. The other was to be a professional wrestler. And in my early 20s, I actually visited a school. I went to UPW, and I wanted to train there. And I literally froze and walked out because I just did not feel like I belonged. So flash forward like 15 more years, I end up meeting Barry Cohen. Barry Cohen introduces me to MPW. I come to a show.
Okay.
Paul says, "Hey, we have this class. Why don't you go check it out? We got a really good trainer that's teaching over there. Why don't you go check it out?" I'm like, "Are you serious?" Absolutely. So he sends me over to what was originally Bump U, and we're out in Chatsworth. Interesting that full circle back in Chatsworth again.
Yeah.
And I walk in, and I introduce myself, and I'm kind of looking around, and I'm the oldest guy there for sure. And I'm just kind of feeling things out, checking it out. And you were so cool about it. You were so like, well, let's go. Like, what's your background? What do you do? What your first question was? What was your physical skill level, right?
Yeah.
On a scale of 1 to 10, 0 being the worst athlete in the world and 10 being, professional athlete. I
Yeah.
said, I don't know. I'm like, I've been doing martial arts for 30 years. I'm pretty good. And then I learned that, man, I had a lot more to learn. It was just a good time. So that's how we met and formed this relationship over many years. We ended up bringing Bump U out to Moore Park and created the Millennium Wrestling Academy. And then we moved the academy from Moore Park back to Chatsworth, and here you are still teaching the class there. So I mean that was our introduction, and it's just kind of grown from there. And
Yeah.
I wish that I could be training with you, but life just happens to get in the way a little bit these days.
Yeah. I remember that first day very well. I think it's cool that, like, the guy I know now, I think I would have approached you very different than I approached you as here's just some guy,
Mm.
like if I had known kind of the caliber of martial artist you were and stuff, I would have probably expected a lot more of you and like pushed you really hard. But I was like, that's just a guy. I was like, here's just a dad with a hip hop hat ready to play some wrestling. And and I remember I was like, man, every time I touch this guy, he's solid tight. And I remember telling you like, relax your body, relax your body. Wrestling's fake, and you would just get up so just solid as a rock, and I was like, relax. And like you said, like you realize things. Um, I came into your karate school one time and realized almost the same thing you're saying is that the movements are so different from one sport to another. No matter how good you are at something, to step into a wrestling world, you're like, oh, I've got to be loose and fluid and not be tight. And then
Mhm.
I came to your school one day and I was like, how am I supposed to do my arms? I just want to excel and I want to like open up big to show my punch. And like, so it's like, it's really neat to see the difference. And yeah, I treated you like a normal guy and I should have like immediately had you throwing some sweet kicks, but I didn't.
Yeah, in time we worked it out, and I came into my own. It definitely took a different mindset. I think I had to really empty my cup of, okay, the
Yeah.
martial artist can stay home, and I just need to learn this new skill. Now, of course, the martial arts helped me a ton, because I was never in fear of anybody being too stiff with me, or taking bumps was not really a big deal. Where what I really learned from you the most, and I as a kid you just don't know it, you just don't really think about it, you're just so engulfed in the story, but you didn't really realize there's a story, like there's a whole psychology to it. And before we get too far into talking about pro wrestling, because I think that's our biggest common bond, and we'll definitely come back to that. But I want to learn a little bit more about you, and I want people that are watching to learn a little bit more about where did Steve Adkins come from, and how did he become Seth Skyfire?
Well, Seth Skyfire is gone, but um, I have a weird past of many avenues, and I can easily say that I am the greatest pro wrestling, ghost hunting, special effects stand up comedian in the world. Um, like, because not many people go down all those different avenues and, kind of like keep moving, I guess. They pick one and stay with it until it beats them to death, and then they just die. Uh, but I'm from Alabama. Alabama, just Southern wrestling nonstop. And I think my motivation for everything kind of goes back to two or three things. Like, so as a kid, you go to the video store and you rent videos nonstop. And I would get Ghostbusters almost every time we went, and I would get something with the Undertaker almost every time we went. So, like those two things, if you look at it, that's special effects in Ghostbusters. That's the Undertaker in Paranormal and Ghostbusters Paranormal. That's wrestling with the Undertaker. That's kind of, and then comedy with Ghostbusters. So it's kind of like
Mhm.
I watch Undertaker and Ghostbusters nonstop, and like that's what I want to be is Ghostbusters Undertaker my whole life, and be hilarious like Bill Murray. And um, but I watch so much wrestling. I would get every video at the video store. I almost don't remember. It's like an old relationship. I don't. I know I dated wrestling for like so long, but I don't remember how much. I know I loved her a lot back then, but I don't remember it. Like I loved it. I loved it so much. God, I was like
And where did that?
crazy.
So you watch the videos and stuff, but go back a little bit earlier, like as a kid, as a young kid. What'd you do in Alabama? Did you play other sports? Did you get involved physically in anything else?
Well, I was mainly like I love to draw comic books, which kind of goes to the character-driven life, I guess. And I skateboarded a lot. I skateboarded from when I was about probably 5 or 6. I always had a skateboard or a bike under me, and then sort of like through everything, in Alabama, you're told to go outside and come back when it is dark. And when you come back when
Hmm.
it's dark, they go take a flashlight, come back at dinner. So you end up walking 6 miles away and finding an old barn and walking around an old barn with a flashlight and hearing things and running out and running home and just hoping no one knows you went there. And that's sort of a little bit of the ghost hunting. But I never did a lot of sports as a
Okay.
kid. I told my first trainer, Mad Dog Dan Sawyer, I'm used to falling on concrete. I was covered in scabs, and when I went to my first class, they're like, "What do you do?" I'm like, "Oh, I skateboard like all day. I worked at a skate shop and skateboarded all day, and I loved wrestling and never thought about training." I literally met a bouncer at a bar, and he said, "I'm a wrestling trainer," and I was like, "I'll do it tomorrow." Like, you know, I thought it was
Hmm.
like getting into magic. I thought there's no way through the secret door. I always just
Right.
loved it. And I met this bouncer at a bar, and then grabbed my buddy Josh that you've met, and I was telling him like, "Hey, guy at the door, watch this." So me and my buddy Josh, we started doing head scissors on the concrete and Frankensteiners off the stairs, and like we just always played it in the living room. I've known Josh my whole life that I can remember. So, but we're sitting there wrestling on the concrete, and we're like, "We got what it takes," and this guy's like, "Stop! You're gonna die!" Like, imagine watching like two 18-year-old kids doing head scissors on the concrete, and like you would be like, "What are you doing? Stop! Go to class!" Like,
That's insane. That's crazy. Well, that's so funny too that you bring up, growing up in Alabama, much like I grew up out here in California. You go out until it got dark, and then you'd
yeah,
come home, and and you have kids now, and I mean, could you ever imagine letting your boy just like go cruise the neighborhood with a
I
flashlight?
I cannot. One, he won't just play in the backyard by himself. I'll tell him, go play in the backyard till dinner. And he'll be like, "What do you want me to do?" I'm like, "There's dirt and sticks and we got two dogs. Go play." And then he'll
Right.
just sit out here and he'll just sort of piddle around. Um, but then just as he
Different time.
starts getting muddy, it's dinner time. But he's a little pretty good at it. And I got a 2-year-old now too that, well, I
Yeah.
think she's the pit bull. She'll run out here and dive in the mud, and that second kid is, super indestructible, super brave. But I could not imagine not knowing where they were.
Right.
That
Yeah,
would
our
lose
parents
my
were just
mind.
like, "Bye," you know. They
Yeah.
they and they could yell or whistle loud enough for us to hear them, no matter where you were, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially my
So
dad.
so let's
So
talk a little bit more. You meet this bouncer, and he's a trainer, and you and Josh start getting involved. Talk about your like when you really started getting training and move from there.
see, I've never really told my wrestling story. I've done a lot of paranormal podcasts and things like that, but this is kind of a first for me, and I'm excited to tell it here for the first time, really. So I loved wrestling my whole life, and I never thought it was sort of the birth of kind of WCW was just starting to take off. So watching wrestling, um, I remember during training, the NWO night with Hogan happened, and I was already hooked before that. So I was watching before the big Monday Night Wars, and I loved Shawn Michaels. I just watched Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels. I would slow mo. This is before I'm even training. I would slow mo his stuff, and I would be in my room like practicing my body movements to try to look like the way he moved for no reason. You know. And then, buddies always play on trampolines, and buddies, I was the best suplexer in high school. And I would take friends and we'd suplex them on my shitty car, and just because we loved wrestling, but we didn't think we'd do it. Um, but I guess I'm weird or sort of like a trained yourself. I had figured out lockups. I had figured out some like most of the techniques myself,
Uh-huh.
and so Birmingham's nightlife is a fairly small place. So my buddy Josh goes to this bar called Dave's and meets this just big pit bull of a man, Mad Dog Dan Sawyer, and he says he owns a wrestling school. And Josh runs and finds me in town. That's how small town was. And so I run up to town. I mean, this is paved. People here, Alabama, it's paved streets and nightlife and clubs. It's a regular downtown. But Josh finds me, brings me up to Dave's, and that's when we do our live audition for him. uh, and he says, "That's great." And I'm like, and then in my brain, it's like, light bulb. I'm like, I can do it. You're gonna let me in the ring. No one. I thought it was impossible. I thought it was like joining the circus or learning magic. Like I
Right.
said, it's impossible. And I think it was a Friday, and he goes, "Okay, we'll start next Saturday." Um, so this is so long ago. Um, the next Saturday, I wake up at the crack of dawn. I look in the phone book. I find his name. And I think I go to his house, and I'm like, "Are we wrestling today?" And he's like, "No, next Saturday." And I'm like, "Can we please start today?" and I'm like, "Can we start today? And can I buy some boots? Like, I want wrestling boots." Uh, so he sold me an old pair of boots that he bought from Texas that someone sold him. They said they bought them from Ric Flair or something. But I buy these boots that come almost past my knees. I think they were like 60-eye leather wrestling boots. So I got these big, like, shiny white boots. Uh, and I have my volleyball knee pads, and I go up to the school. And, he's one of these guys that Dan was so gruff, kind of not look you in the eye, kind of stare at you. And, I'm, if you've met me, I'm very silly and I'm very kind of hyper. Um, so multiply what you know of me now by 10,000. That's what I was like at about 19. I was a lunatic. I don't know how I survived. I would flip off anything, climb anything, fight anybody, do anything, jump off anything. Uh, and that's before wrestling. So I'm just talking to this big monster in this car, just blah 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 blah. You ever seen Shawn Michaels fighting British Bulldog? You ever? Hey, do you think Owen Hart can do it? And I'm just like going crazy. And I finally break him, and he becomes the fanboy next to me, and he becomes one of my best buddies. Probably before we even get up there, like he real, that moment you realize like this guy is as into this as I am. This guy's
Yeah. Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
And he
Right.
finally like put his wall down. Like this guy's being real, and he's not. So we get up there and we train. I think he showed me lock up. I think he showed me take an arm, and I think I bumped. And then that was it. And I think I cried because I was like, "That's it." I'm like, "That's barely an hour." He's like, "Yeah, I gotta wait till next week." And I was like, "Can I just stay a little longer? I want to do this, And it was like, I think his class was $1,000 in 10 classes or something like that. Something kind of, and after the 10 classes, you got to go back to the school. And it was weird. He had like a couple of his old school guys, and then Alabama was full of these like 65-year-old, like old guys that all kind of had this dirty Southern gimmick, that all called it in the ring, that all were super cool, um, all feather light and big pot bellies and bandanas. And uh, so he had this army of these guys, and he got me. And then I come in not knowing respect and not knowing like hierarchy. And I'm
Right.
just like I'm with Dan in the car to all these guys, like, "Oh man, you're wrestling, good to meet you, blah blah blah. I love Shawn Michaels. I want to be Shawn Michaels around here. I want to be a young guy." And so all these guys are kind of like, "Oh, this kid's fucking crazy. Let's wrestle him." So I end up with probably the most famous is a guy named Mike Jackson. He's even popped up on TNA, I think, in fairly recent years. He's old guy, old worker. There's so many of these old guys, and then the old guy will tell you right before he wrestles, "Oh, I'm blind," just so you know. And you're like, "What?" But I end up, so I'm this rookie that I've learned 20 moves, and I keep going in the ring with all these guys, these older guys. And just calling it, because I think that's what you do. And that's to tell that to my current students. They're like, "What? You just went there and called it with like," and these old guys have you punch and abdominal stretch and hold it and sell, and you don't do that much, but you go out there with a blank slate and you're just this hyper 18-year-old insane child uh, that just wants to show as big as he can and fire up as much as he can and never sells when he's supposed to and just screws everything up. But it sort of embodied this really old mentality to me. And then WCW started bringing in the cruiserweights, and I was like, I want to do everything Ray and Eddie just did.
Huh.
So I kind of my buddy Josh trained a little, and then he quit, so he didn't train for a long time. I mean, I want to say it was like 8 more years or 5 more years or something. We were
Hmm.
still best friends, but he didn't
Right.
come to class. He was busy at a job or something. But I had a guy named Ben that I skateboarded with. I got him to wrestle. But there's this martial arts teacher who wanted to be a referee that came, and I go, no, you're too good. You're going to be a wrestler. He became a wrestler. A big college kid named Mason Fury. So we got this new group of kids, and I became this kind of like ringleader of, we're going to do everything Sean did. We're going to do everything Ray did. We're going to do everything Jericho does. And we're going to do it all tonight. And I would just have these matches that were just full of everything, full of every move in the world. And
So
I wouldn't trade those for nothing.
let's take a segue on that really quick, into the way you trained and the way you started. We talked a little bit before the video about how the wrestlers are now, people coming in, and how it's different. Talk a little bit about the difference in, like, you just kind of loving it so much and
Yeah.
just wanting to be in it, and then you got these people now that it's just different. So explain to us how it's different, what you see different.
So if I got in my car in 1996, I think when I started, uh, I got in my car. I had wrestling music in the CD player. I went home, turned my TV on, started wrestling tape. My shirts were wrestling. Everything was wrestling. Everything on my wall was wrestling. That was my whole life. These kids now, they kind of like it. Not saying kids, but it's like I don't feel that obsession from them. They all want to
Mm.
kind of dabble. Um,
Right.
does that make sense?
Yep.
I was like, I'm gonna main event WrestleMania. Like 18-year-old kid, I was like, I'm gonna train and I'm gonna main event WrestleMania, and I'm not stopping until that. Oh no, Danny's on. But hi Danny.
What's
Um,
up, Danny?
but a lot of these guys are kind of part time, and uh, I would train probably Tuesday. Well, and also guys go, well, he lives far away. So in Alabama, from Birmingham out to the Aniana Training Center was probably about an hour and 50 minutes or more, through the woods at night with, Leatherface living out there. So I drove that probably 4 nights a week, about just to train with my buddies until Dan made us go home and then drive back through that dark, terrifying forest. Um, and I don't, everybody kind of has an excuse. And then me training was what wrestling was, and show days were sporadic. Like you got a show about once a month at first, and you would train. Oh, we got a show. Dan
Right.
was also the promoter that I knew, and he would probably get a show a month, which is good for an indie guy. So imagine like MPW if there was no school. You would have to have a show occasionally. Most promotions are
Hmm.
just an occasional show. Um, but guys now, I feel like, don't think training is as important. Um, and I think training is more important than even shows. Even though these guys have shows weekly, which that didn't happen to me until about 3 or 4 years in. There was a promoter named Will Owens that ran a little south of Huntsville, and he ran a weekly show. And I would go up every week and wrestle in this weekly show. And it was a time where um, I would take a buddy, and like I would take uh, what's his name, Rome Moore, JJ Steele. So I would take
Hmm.
JJ Steele for like 5 weeks. JJ Steele's a guy that's also been at MPW. So
Hmm.
but I would take him for like 5 weeks and wrestle him, and kind of on our own come up with a program. Like, you get disqualified tonight. The next night, we'll do a count out. Then we'll do this. Then I'll just attack you before the bell, and then we'll do our final match. So I would come up with these little programs at this little spot. And I feel like these guys now don't. I don't know. I feel like once they put on a show, once you're in front of a crowd and you don't like die, and I guess it's like stand up. If you don't bomb, if I don't miss the spot and I don't uh break my neck, then I guess I'm done training, right? No, no, no. um, and I tell these
Well,
guys now, like if you were signed tomorrow, they'd send you to school. Like you're not
yeah,
gonna go to TV. Like training is where you get next level comfort and
right.
everything's a computer in your head. And no one wants to do that, I don't think.
Well, I see the same thing in martial arts. People earn a black belt. You train 3, 4, 5 years to earn a black belt, and then once I get to be a black belt, or especially when you become an instructor and you're teaching, it's like, oh well, if I'm good enough to be a black belt, if I'm good enough to teach a class, like training's not really, but
Yeah.
it's an evolution. I mean, no matter what it doesn't matter if it's pro wrestling, it doesn't matter if it's martial arts, it doesn't matter if it's speaking or comedy or what. You have to keep evolving, because once you stop evolving and you stop growing, you really stop being relevant or having anything to offer.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah. So you turned an opportunity, you turned an obsession into an opportunity, and you ended up going to OVW. Talk about how you got, you know, that opportunity, what that was like training there. Because for those of you that are watching and aren't pro wrestling fans, OVW was like the training ground to go to WWE back in the day, right? So how did you get that chance? How'd that work out?
So I'm in Birmingham, and Louisville is about 4 or 5 hours north of Birmingham. And back in that time, everybody would look at the OVW website because you heard about what it was, and you'd check it out. And we had, and also I was about probably 4 or 5 years in, and I was kind of like not running the place. Mad Dog still ran and booked the shows, but I was like already a very top guy, if that, not in the way that things are now, but I knew everybody. I worked hard. I kind of would help everybody with their match. I put my matches together. I was having, good matches. I was wrestling hard. I was having like hour long, super high spot, amazing, matches. And I was a big fish in a little pond, and I always imagined, like, what if I stayed? Would I have been discovered in Birmingham? I don't think so. So that was sort of my mindset: is you want to be. I didn't just want to be a big fish, and I didn't just want to wrestle. I wanted to main event WrestleMania. you know. Um, so we booked a girl that lived in Nashville, and she came down and said, "Well, me and my friends drive to Louisville on Saturdays to go to amateur class." And I was like, "There's an amateur class for OVW?" And they're like, "Yeah, it's an amateur class. And sometimes the superstars come down." And I was like, "Really?" So the next Saturday, I jump in the car. I go, "Can I come? If you're driving, can I come?" So I ride with these two girls up to Louisville, and I go to amateur class. Literally, we stop, and Batista's there, and Nick Dinsmore, and Johnny Jeter, and uh, I think we saw David Flair and Dumb Basham, and all these giant guys. Um, and I've been working out, but I was nothing close to what these guys were. But I've been wrestling like a machine for 5 years. I had never heard the word shine. I had never heard the word comeback. I had never heard the word heat spot. I just
Hmm.
wrestled. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
I think maybe because Dan was trained so old school, you just sort of pick it up from the old guys. You pick up the cadence, but I didn't know the names and stuff, sort of. Um, but we go to this amateur class, and I don't know what most people's mentality was. I look around at the amateur class, not the WWE guys, and I'm like, I'm the best guy in this room. I'm gonna prove it today. Like, so I ran the ropes super hard. I out wrestled every kid that got in the ring. I did all my spots as hard as I could. They put me with some guys that did a match, and then he tried to stiff me or something, and I tied him in a knot and did some cool moves and did my leg drop off the top. And at the end of class, I just go to Nick Dinsmore and I go, "Well, how did I do?" And he was like, "Move here." And I'm like, "Okay." Um, And I literally, so it was like that. I drive up with some girls, probably about 4 weeks in a row, and then I go and I pack up everything I own and I move to Louisville, like overnight, leave my hometown. And I tell people that when you love something more than you love
Hmm.
everything in your life, I must have
Right.
loved wrestling more than I loved my girlfriend at the time, my apartment, my parents. I loved wrestling more than I loved all that stuff. And I just left everything and just went. Um,
So this was not a plan that was cooked up. This was not a like I'm going to do this, and this, and get there. It
yeah.
just kind of happened. You went up there 4 weeks. You get asked, "Hey, come up here," and
Well,
boom, you just drop everything and go.
Well, and it wasn't like, oh, we're gonna sign you, kid. If we no, Nick
Right.
Dinsmore said you work hard and you have the passion. Like, come up. Um, and I saw it as a back door or a kink in the armor of WWE that, like, well, I can get where the big guys are. And literally, when we, after class, I remember Matt Morgan got in the ring with me. He's a guy that he's been on WWE a little bit. He was great talent that they underutilized. But I remember one of my first days, Matt Morgan got in the ring with me, and I'm used to trusting everybody, right? Matt Morgan is known for being stiff, but
Mm,
stiff at some pro level is a lot different. Like what I would consider stiff now and what I consider stiff when I was like 19 or 21, like, is totally different. So I get in there with Matt, and Matt goes, "Anybody want to train with me?" And I'm like, "Me?" Like, I don't even think about it. Everyone else is cowering. So I get in there. Matt calls all his spots. He's doing side slams. It's the first time I experienced people like, "Oh, I don't want to bump." Like, I've never heard that, and I still think that's kind of bullshit. The I don't want to bump. I remember taking big boots from him, and I was trained. They put up the big boot. You lay your face on it and take a bump, And he was like, "Wow, how'd I take a big boot?" And I remember, like, he was a tough enough guy, and he was like, that was cool that I wasn't afraid of him. Sort of like
hmm
you in your first day of class. I didn't know who you were. I didn't know who he was. He didn't know who I was, but I went in there and worked for him as hard as I could.
Right.
And it was really fun. But I saw it as amateur class is a way to get in. And I went to that first Wednesday night that I'd never been to, and it was like, this is OVW. I'm watching, I think is Randy Orton versus uh, I don't know, John Cena, and it's all these stars, and those guys were starting to debut. So when I first went, it was like Cena would be on Raw, and then he'd be on OVW, and then they were kind of going back and forth.
hmm
Um, so I would just go to that Wednesday night, and then they changed buildings to this big building, and it was a lot better. And I would train, 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 train. Rip Rogers took over the amateur class, or I guess there was an intermediate class. And since I moved there, Nick put me in that class, and it was literally like a class of 50 people. Um,
Wow.
and same thing. I'm like, all right, I got to be better than 50 people now.
Right.
And maybe I never had the abs, but I could out wrestle almost anybody at that time. I have not that it's a cockiness, it's that I worked so hard already before I got to Louisville that people underestimated me and didn't know I had that background
Right.
of insanity, you know. Um, and then I get to Louisville and I'm just already kind of grizzled and from Alabama, and all these other guys are about maybe 2 year quote pros. But
hmm
I've already been beat up. I've already been stiffed. I've already gigged a few times. I've already done tables. I've already done ladders. I've already done chairs. I've already done you know cage matches. I've already done a lot of shit before I went up there. And then I'm in this beginner class, and it was sort of easy. I thought, like, oh, I'm gonna
Right.
fucking rock all these beginners. Um,
Yeah.
and then
And,
you get asked to the advanced class. So the next
right.
thing you do, you go to the class. You go to class the next morning, and there's Billy Gunn stretching. There's Cena. I'm at class with these guys. And then what does my brain say? Well, got to be the best in this room.
hmm
Um, and I remember Nova. Uh, If you don't know who Nova is, look him up. Nova's amazing. Another Simon Dean, another extremely underutilized talent that could have been. I think he could have been like a Shawn Michaels level. He's so good at wrestling and so smart. But I remember like I got in there with Nova one day on a 10-pin drill, and it felt so cool to have like, wow, this guy knows more than me in the avenue of technique and skill and wrestling and
Mhm.
moves. You know what I mean? Like showing me
Right.
a whole new deck of cards. But me
Right.
knowing to be loose and turn and pivot and let him pin me and not being afraid. I think people get afraid. But it was really great to finally get on that level of I now have peers. It took WWE, OVW contracted class for me to be like, finally, people better than me I can absorb from, you know. Um, and Nick Dinsmore too. Nick Dinsmore chaining with him, having fun, seeing all the different things he does and seeing how he moves and picking up his mannerisms and picking up all kinds of little stuff. And the OVW class, I mean, that was 5 days a week. And
Right.
you wrestle Monday, Tuesday, and then I would still go to Monday night beginner class. I think Tuesday night beginner class. So I would train Monday morning, Tuesday night, Tuesday more Tuesday both days, both nights. Wednesday was TV. I would train Thursday, Friday. And they did show Friday night, Saturday night, and sometimes Sunday night. So I wrestled every single day when I was at OVW, and I loved it at the beginning. At the beginning.
And how long was it that you were there in total?
Um, I moved there in 2002,
Hmm.
and I want to say I left in 2000. I don't understand time. I know I started effect school in 2009,
Okay.
but I don't know. I think I stayed in Louisville till that. I think 2000, early 2009,
So
maybe.
what was it that started to change? Because there's, obviously, you never went to WWE, right? And you started to lose something. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, at first, so I'm in amateur class. I'm in the class, and they have these amateur shows. And I had an amateur show where I got a guy that was pretty good, and I put on an Alabama match. Where I did all my shit. I did everything I could. Tried to steal the show. Finished with my leg drop that's 12 feet above the ground. And uh, Jim Cornette loved it, and then great. I loved your moves. And then I was Sinister Seth Stevens. So my goal was to be like a little Undertaker. That's what I wanted to be. And
Mm.
I think I was immediately told that was a bad idea, Finn Balor. Um, but, it works for him, but it's a bad idea for me. That's not fair. But I wanted to be a little demon. That was my idea. I had this big black trench coat. I had all black gear, long black hair, but I wanted to be like a Shawn Michaels, Rey Mysterio. Uh, what happened? Oh, um, but I wanted to be that kind of character, but like an Undertaker. And then, so Jim Cornette sees me in amateur class, and he goes, "I'm going to put you on TV next week." So Wednesday night, who am I wrestling? Mark Henry. And I'm like, oh my God. And I knew Mark Henry. So I see this mountain over there, and he kind of comes over real slow. He's like, "Hey, man." And I'm like, "Oh, hello, sir." And he's like, "You do a sunset flip?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Hey, good." But he was just like, and he was super nice. And I remember talking about this stuff, and it was supposed to be a squash. And it was my first OVW match. And it was really fun. It was so fun working with Mark because it was like I'm now playing with guys I see on TV. I'm in the
Right.
video game. My brain. Like I'm wrestling Mark Henry. And we had a great match. It was really fun. The next week he put me with a guy called Mark Magnus, who was Muhammad Hassan. Another just awesome wrestler, amazing talent. Mark Magnus, he felt he was the Shawn of OVW. So he's like, "I'm going to bring out the best in you and get the best I can get out of you." I'm like, "Well, I got a lot in me, sir." And he was like, "Let's do it." We did like rewind springboard ranas. We did walk up the rope, outside dive, head scissors, and
Uh-huh.
nobody in OVW was even doing drop kicks. It was all 7-foot guys, and I wrestled Mark Magnus, and Cornette comes out and hugs me, I think, afterwards or something. And all the guys saw it as finally someone I can practice those moves with,
Huh.
because they're all big guys. So I want to learn to take
Right.
it. I remember teaching big guys that went to the main roster how to take head scissors
Mm-hmm.
because they weren't wrestling anybody that did them. And Cornette put me with Magnus, and Magnus was the OVW world champion. So he put me with Magnus for like 5 weeks straight of us just doing these cool matches. And from then, he put me in a tag team with Mac Johnson and gave us the OVW tag team titles. And at that time, then you start wrestling kind of everybody that comes through. You're working them, and it's so I would stay in a tag team. We worked guys like Eminem and Deuce and Domino, and the Tolans and the Heartbreakers and the Highlanders and all these guys that went to TV. And I was starting to kind of get frustrated a little bit, where it wasn't about. I could tell it wasn't about my wrestling. I'm like, because the crowd's going wild. Crowd
Right.
loves me. I remember something really funny. Beth Phoenix's ex-husband, Joey Knight, he was telling me one night, and I've been in OVW a few years, and he was like, I don't want this to sound weird, but he's like, every time I come to OVW, I always look forward to seeing you because it's always something different and it's always something exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Compared to everybody else is on drag, hip toss, body slam, and that kind of gets old, I guess. But I was at OVW a long time, a really long time. I guess it kind of culminated, I with me and Punk. So when I wrestled Punk, Punk came to OVW, and I had met him at a Ring of Honor show because Joey Mercury took me and Mike Mondo to a Ring of Honor show, and we did a Ring of Honor match. I think Cornette helped set it up too, but we went to Ring of Honor and we met all those guys, and it's just so weird back then. Oh, hi, Daniel Bryan, and everyone's still
Right.
going, and I don't get it. It's so weird. Then you go back to OVW wrestling every week, every night, training every day, every house show, and you literally wrestling becomes 100% second nature. They bring in this guy Punk, and I kind of didn't like him. He was kind of a dick to everybody. We get a house show in E-Town, Kentucky, where I was the TV champion and he was the world champion. And Al Snow was the booker at the time, and he's like, "Well, just do a baby fun match, put you guys together." And I think because we both had that same mentality, and I still hadn't been defeated yet mentally by the WWE or wrestling,
Right.
and I kind of was like, "I'm gonna show this guy, indie guy. I've been fucking, And I kind of, since I've never been on TV and stuff, everyone underestimates me every time they meet me this whole time, and then I get in
Yeah.
there and just rock the shit. But so I go in there with Punk, and literally probably the best chemistry I'd ever had in the ring with anybody.
Really.
Without speaking, we were doing like the hop on your hips, fish in a bucket, shins to the shoulders, sunset, roll through, like, because we both had done it with other people so much. We were
Mm-hmm.
doing complex spots that you have to talk with. We were doing them without talking. And it was like, wow, finally, someone you think exactly like I think.
Right.
He couldn't do a fat kid cartwheel, but he had a lot of good psychology, and he had in the ring, he's really smart. He's never misses a spot, and he's always there. You know what I mean? But so I wrestled Punk, and we do this great baby angle where we become a tag team. We wrestle once. We do the handshake gimmick. Crime Time jumps us. We become a tag team. We wrestle Crime Time. We win the OVW tag belts. So I'm TV champion, tag champion, Punk's world champion, tag champion. We
Hmm.
wrestle Deuce and Domino. We lose the belts. We start this, Punk starting to turn heel on me. And it's really cool that, yeah, he turns heel. There's a great video about it. And then we start really working this angle. And so then this weird thing happens. So I get a call to go on the road. So I go on the road and I wrestle Hurricane Helms. I have 2 nights in a row. I have great matches. I come back to OVW and I twisted my ankle really bad, but I didn't care. So I was just going to keep working. But they go, "You're hurt. We're going to do a hurt angle." So I was going to come out, and this guy, Charles Evans, was going to jump me. And then my old tag team partner, Chet the Jet, would take my title shot and beat Punk. And Punk would leave forever. So if anything, I thought, because Punk was going to TV, in my head, I just did house shows with Helms and Rock the Shit. And I'm about to go up too. Right? That's what I think.
Right.
So I don't even get my payoff match with Punk, which was kind of made me sad. And then I really was hurt. And so Punk goes to TV, and I lose my title, and I get fake beat up. I have to come back in my silver lethal luchador mask to hide that it's me. We did a whole gimmick, but it kind of started, I think right after about that time, I start going like, oh, everyone's going up. Everyone's going up. Everybody's going to TV. Everybody's going to TV. I'm teaching the beginner class. I'm kind of going to all the practices, teaching the class, going to all the shows. I'd occasionally do house show loop or something, but it kind of started to get stale when the locker room isn't full of your friends anymore.
Right.
Like a guy goes from living on your couch to buying a car, and you start going, "That's cool," and then you end up, "Oh, I'm wrestling someone who's, oh, this is a kid. He's 18. I'm now, 22. I've been wrestling 8 or 9 years or something," and I'm like, "Oh, I'm not crazy like this kid." So think of me in Alabama, and Al comes
Right.
up and wants to wrestle this grizzled guy who's been around the block, and I'm kind of like, I can't do this. I'm not going to dive like that. I'm not going to do this. And I understand where you're coming from. I don't want to do that. But I did it anyway. I always worked real hard. I never did bad. And it sort of packs it all in. But, I get released. I don't think I was even signed for 2 years. And what I find really funny is what everyone thinks happens when you're signed. So I have a great practice match in front of nobody with Aaron the Idol Stevens. Johnny Ace comes to the back, signs me. And it's great, right? Here we go. Rocket's taking off. No, I never had a conversation with anybody. Ever. I never had, well, creative wants to know, what are your goals? What are you thinking? What do you see your character? Never once. You'd occasionally get, cut your hair. Okay. All right. Bye. Oh, okay. Grow a beard. Okay. And I remember they would do stuff like that to people. They would just walk by and throw a 1-word, change yourself. And I remember them coming back through, and my buddy Mike Mondo had this big beard. And one of the guys was like, "Why do you have a beard?" And Mondo's like, "You said grow a beard." And they're like, "Shave that shit." So they would forget stuff. And so they
Right.
would, so by the time of 1-word comments, I go from my long-haired kind of Jericho Shawn Michaels look. So I'm now in trunks and knee pads and boots with a short haircut. And I'm just sort of like, you just keep ticking away at who I am to compare me to Orton or to compare me to somebody else that I'm not, I
So
never,
at this
Yeah.
At this point, I mean, are you feeling just kind of used and abused, and not, not getting the respect that you deserved or the recognition that you deserved, or kind of, I mean, describe a little bit more how you were feeling about that.
Uh, so that obsession with wrestling had gone because it
Right.
became my job, and I did it for so long every day. And I almost want to say, other than the people I worked or people from the crowd, no one behind the curtain ever said anything good. They would always come out, you didn't sell that, you didn't do this, you didn't do this, and that sucked. Don't ever do that again. And do this, and you're fat. Okay, thanks. And now that I am fat, I know how not fat I was back when I was fat. So now it's like, what the fuck? But it was always just. I remember at one point I had a match with a guy named Mike Cruel in a little town in Kentucky, and Al Snow would say the goal of the match is for them to break down the walls and parade you around the ring. So I had this match with Mike Cruel, and it was such a good match that on 1, 2, 3, I slid out. They broke the barricades down, and the crowd just hugged me. And it was just like, wow. And I
Huh.
go to the back, and it couldn't have been a better match. There's no evidence of it anywhere. Mike Cruel probably remembers it. Anybody who was at OVW at the time probably remembers it. Great match. I get to the back. I've done the impossible. They broke the barricades and hugged me. Al comes back and he's like, well, if you had just done this, if you had just done this, you'd have had him more. If you just done this. And it's just like, I mean, not to knock Al either, and that's his job, and I love Al, and he was super fun. But at some point, I started asking him, like, compliment sandwich, please? Like, I know you're gonna shit on me, but tell me something I did right so I can keep doing
Yeah.
it. Um,
Right.
and it kind of was like you can't get straight answers. You're like, are you wanting me to be Rey Mysterio, or are you wanting me to be Shawn Michaels? Like, are you wanting me to sell and tell stories? Or are you wanting moves out of me? Because I don't know. Well, what do you think? What do you think? I don't know. I can go out there and do every move in the world, or I can go out there and sell. There's a big difference. And well, what do you think the story needs? I'm like, fucking tell me. Like, tell me more. Like I'm not trying to play a trick here. I'll do anything. I have no motivation other than to do the best I can. But it was sort of like, I don't know, you just couldn't get the right answer. And it was kind of like you can only go full throttle so long, and
Hmm.
then you're kind of.
So what was the final straw? What was the decision, or like you just said, I'm done. This is it. I'm out.
So I get released, which literally seemed like I just got signed. That's the way it felt. Less than 2 years, I busted my ass, wrestled my whole life. It felt like uh, I get signed, I get released, like almost immediately with no information. And I remember my buddy Nova, he was Nova, the guy I talked about doing the pins with. He was head of developmental, and I remember him telling me, he was like, Seth, there's nothing I could do. It was like they're reading the names off the list. They were like, blah, blah, gone, blah, blah, gone. He's like, before they even said the next name, I couldn't chime in. I couldn't, nothing, you're gone. And I was like, why? He's like, I don't know. Like, just post SummerSlam, clean house. Um, and it was kind of like, I knew I had, okay, I'm released. I'm 26 or 27. I don't know. Time's weird. No, it's probably like 27 or 28. Um, no, I got released and I stayed at OVW a little while. And I tried, I came back. And that's when I wrestled with Evan Bourne and Ace Steel and Cabana. That was after I got signed and fired and stayed at OVW, trying to still hold on to this dream that I had starting to forget. It was starting to
Hmm.
fade. Um, and I remember buying like a calendar book, and I'm like, "Fuck WWE, I'm gonna fill this thing." And Punk gave me some numbers, and I called all these numbers, and nobody would book me because I'm just some guy from OVW. I wasn't on TV. I wasn't famous. The only time I've been on WWE's website was when I was released. That was it. So I've got all the skills in the world, almost no passion left, and it's all I know. All I know is wrestling since I was a little kid, um, and I can't get booked. And if I could get booked, it was like, we'll give you $100 and a room. And I'm like, well, I was making a paycheck. Like, I don't remember my paycheck, but it wasn't $100. It was pretty good. I think base was like $1,000 a week back then. But it was like $100 to drive from Louisville to Chicago to wrestle for $100. And you take it once, you take it twice, and then you're kind of like, I can't do it. Like,
Right.
and kind of like I said, I'd gone back to OVW because I lived next to it. I was still kind of teaching beginner class. And I remember Tank Tolan was teaching beginner class with me. And one of the things that started getting me out of OVW was, so I guess Tank taught beginners class and I taught beginners class. And so I had gone up to Chicago to do a show, and I'm driving back, and Tank calls me and was like, are you going to be at class? And I'm like, no, I'm in Chicago. And he's like, oh, I'm not going to be there either. So we called somebody to cover it, but then we both got in trouble for not being there and not having it prepared, which I don't know. Is that really my fault? But so then we both got, you guys can't teach beginner class anymore. Give us your key. I had a key to the building, you know. So now I'm not going at night. I'm fired. I'm not going during the day. I'm going Wednesday night, and I'm wrestling with the boys. You know, meeting Ace and Cabana was really great. That was the best part of this part of my wrestling journey. Was I remember Ace and Cabana got signed. Ace Steel, Colt Cabana, and Punk was still kind of living there, but he assigned them to me. Like, Ace, Cabana, this is your best friend Seth. Like, I feel weird saying Seth, but I was assigned them as best friends, and it was kind of cool that we, you know, had these two new best friends, and it was really fun. And they were the funnest part of OVW at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And then they kind of left, so they sent them to Florida, and so now it's like it's me and all these guys that are 10 years my junior that are just starting out. I'm at OVW. I don't feel like I'm wanted there anymore because none of my buddies are there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I get booked in a match with a guy, and I don't want to say his name, but it's a guy I trained like a year before, and he's going over. And I'm like, but in this building, I've pinned CM Punk for the world title. I've won tag belts. I've bled. I've cried. I've had this room to their feet, and now they wanted me to lose to an abdominal stretch because he wanted to push that as his finish. And it was sort of like, I just trained this guy, and I had to show him how to do it. Like, and it was kind of like, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say. I mean, so at this point, like in your head, you're done. You're done. You're ready to move
Well,
on. You're
the
ready to
the
go do something else.
the concept of quitting never crossed my mind because it's all I knew. It's all, I'm eating from the same bowl for so long. It's all I knew. Like, to go back to the woman, I fell in love with pro wrestling, and then I dated her for a while, and she loved me back, and then she dumped me. And then I'm just sort of like, gotta stay ready in case she looks back. Look back.
Right.
Look back. Come on, I'm still here. I love you. Look back. And then you kind of go, she's never going to look back. She's never going to look back. She's never going to treat me good. She's moved on without me. And I remember, like, I'm packing my gear bag at my apartment, and I'm throwing stuff in, and I'm just crying. And I'm like, I don't want to fucking wrestle. I hate this shit. I fucking hate this. I hate these knee pads. I hate everything. And I go, I don't want to wrestle. And then a voice in my head, so there's a million people in the world that don't wrestle. And I go, yeah, I could be. And that night, I was booked in a makeshift tag team to get squashed by some beginner guys they were trying to push. And it's like, Did I, like I said, wasn't I like kind of a legend in this building? And I just called Danny Davis and I go, "Hey Danny, I'm not coming tonight." And he's like, "Oh, you're not feeling good?" I go, "No, I think I just quit wrestling." And he's like, "Oh." I go, "Yeah, I think I'm done." He's like, "You want to do like retirement or something?" I'm like, "No, that's wrestling." I go, "I don't want to wrestle. I don't want to do a retirement match. I don't want to step away. I don't want to
Mm.
show." I go, "I hate it." And I was like, "I hate it. I can't stand it now. Um, I'm done." Oh, okay. So, and this is weird. That night, like like a just like I always use the girlfriend reference. Just like that, I take everything she ever gave me, and I start putting it in a bag. Put all my kick pads in a bag, all my tights, tearing down posters, putting every signatures, throwing it in a bag, put it in a big garbage bag, throw it in the closet, slam the closet, go to my computer, and I'm just like, also, just to add, at this point, I could not imagine wrestling another night and not having a weekend off and not having a time to myself. I didn't know who I was. All I was training, 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 wrestling, training. I was lost in this repetition. And I throw everything, I go in my room, and I sit at my computer, and I'm just like, oh. No, I think I laid down. I think I slept for like 15 hours first. Like, I just slept. And I slept for so long. And I get up and I walk through my apartment and I sit down and I get in front of my computer and I go, the rest of my life starts today. That's what I'm telling myself. And I look around my room just like I'm looking around the room I'm in now. I go, what do I see? I go, there's a Freddy glove, there's a Leatherface mask, there's a Chainsaw Massacre poster, Tom Savini picture. Tom Savini, he's a makeup artist. Tom Savini makeup effects. School. Tom Savini makeup effects school, Pittsburgh. Sign up. When can I start? 1 week. Sign up. How much does it cost? I don't want to say. It literally cost every penny I had. I had saved up my whole wrestling career. It cost, I mean, over $40,000. But it was like, how much is it? Credit card. Boom. I guess I'm packing. So I signed up the night after I quit wrestling. I signed up for Tom Savini Special Effects School. And it felt great. I was so excited. I don't know if you've ever. I have everything Leatherface and Freddy and Jason and Army of Darkness and Fright Night. That's always been my surroundings since I was a kid. I've always loved horror movies. When I was in high school, I had this cool little. There's a movie called Summer School where these two guys are effects guys. Have you
I
ever
remember
seen
that
that?
movie. I've
Yeah.
seen
So
it.
I even in high school I wanted to be those guys. Even though I was
Yeah.
wrestling, I had my little kit with fake eyeballs and fake noses and scars, and I would occasionally like go somewhere and squirt a nosebleed across the room. So I always was kind of like into effects on top of my wrestling. Um, so it wasn't something new for me. It was just another avenue I haven't accessed. Um, so wrestling was a childhood dream. I did it. I've come. I've got stories that you can't believe. I've been super kicked by Shawn Michaels. I've been chokeslammed by Kane. I've been in the ring with Triple H and The Undertaker, and didn't take moves, but I've been in the ring with them. So it's like I did it. I'm not going to do any better than what I've got. So I can either stay here and die, or I can move forward. So I move forward. Um,
Right.
and not to knock anyone. I had a friend recently pass. I've had a few friends recently pass that you sort of feel bad for them. That you're like, I imagine me. If I didn't quit and go to effects school, I would still be crying in that apartment, waiting for WWE to call me. I would still be just trying to get a girl's attention that doesn't want me. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
And as sort of a message to any ex wrestlers, it's okay to quit. you know, there are a million people out there that don't wrestle, and there's 1,000 other things you can do. There's a billion other things you can do with your life. If it doesn't feel right, wrestling didn't feel right, and looking around my room, effects felt right, and I dove in 100%. And it was just this, and sort of in the back of my head, it was like, I'm going to do a 16-month special effects school, and when I get out, maybe I'll wrestle again. Um,
Right.
I
Never again.
loved it. I loved it so much, and I didn't wrestle for. There was probably like a 5 to 7 year gap. I don't know. Time is weird. Time doesn't make sense. Um, Especially when you get older. Like, you're like, how did I fit 10 years in this? But I guess it did overlap. And how did I, like, um, but
Yeah.
it's like, I had a long time where I didn't do anything to do with wrestling. Um, but special effects school was so fun. And I felt like I was Superman in disguise as Clark Kent. So I go to school and I'm just, fat, but I'm just in best shape of anybody in the school. I'm jacked with traps. I'm 190, bench pressing 375, tan. I shaved my head because I didn't have to have a fucking TV haircut. Uh, yeah, they always said a buzz cut is not a haircut. You can't push a buzz cut. Triple H has a buzz cut. But it's like I was so free.
Right.
And I was so free. I got fat. I put on 60 pounds in 16 months. I went from like one. I got a little porky in school. I met a beautiful girl that my first day of school, they say go buy a camera. I went to Walmart to buy a camera from this really cute blonde haired girl. And I literally, my mom and dad had come to help me move to Pittsburgh to go to school. And when I left Walmart, I told my mom, I go, I think I met my wife. Um, and that was my wife. I married her. And so, like,
And
after,
here you are.
and I'm here.
And you got
But
and
like
2 kids.
2 kids. So I started a whole new chapter, a whole new direction. Um, I changed who I was physically, mentally. Well, I was in such good shape, I could put on 60 pounds and I became a normal guy. I didn't bulk up to like Jabba the Hutt like I am now, but I just became I'm probably 60 pounds bigger than I was after school now. I don't know. I weigh 700 pounds. I
So
don't know.
So we've gone on kind of a roller coaster, for a long
Yeah.
time. Wrestling was such a high, and then it
Yeah.
became such a low, and then
Yeah.
here we are. I would call it the comeback part of your story. Here is that you became the special effects. You've dabbled in well, I shouldn't say dabbled. You told me you have like 100,000 followers or something on TikTok or
Well,
whatever.
ghost hunting is almost like the same story. So I go to special effects school and I learn everything. I come to California with no money in my pocket, my beautiful fiance. I get a good apartment. I move here February 10th. I get a job February 20th at a great shop. Um, I worked on At this point, I've worked on so many big movies. I've worked on 2 Iron Mans, 3 Terminators, 2 Captain Americas, Endgame, Infinity War, both Guardians of the Galaxy. Working on Guardians of the Galaxy 3 right now. Worked on every season of Mandalorian, Boba Fett, Obi-Wan, uh, Ghostbusters, Dark Crystal. I've worked on more movies than I can think of, and I've done so good with it that it sounds scary. So effects started getting stale to me. So my mind works that I've got to chase something all the time. You know what I mean? Um,
Right.
so so there's this period. So when I'm in Louisville or I'm wrestling and I'm traveling, kind of going back to childhood and going into haunted barns and stuff. When I'm traveling with wrestling, every hotel I check in, I go, "What's the haunted room?" And they would always go, "Oh, everyone in every staff in every hotel knows the room that no one wants." And it's sort of neat Next time you check in a hotel, ask, what's the room no one
Oh,
wants?
my daughter worked at a hotel, and she told
Yeah.
me that
Yeah.
there was one.
Every
So
hotel in every town. So when I
yeah.
wrestled, I would travel and I would ask for the haunted room in every room. And it was kind of this fun game I played on the side. Um, and every town has an old church or an old building, and I would drive by and check it out. So just like effects was always there for me in wrestling, ghosts and paranormal was always kind of there for me through everything. Um, and about 2000, all these ghost shows hit, and you start watching these people investigate these places, and some of these locations become as famous as a wrestling star. There's such a big famous haunted location that every show goes to. And then so I'm doing makeup effects, I'm doing movies. uh, I do kind of shop work, so I don't go on set, I don't travel, I don't do anything. I go
Right.
to my workshop desk and I build something, and I go home at night, and life starts to get a little routine. I start teaching wrestling again. Um, so I've got another outlet, but I'm watching these ghost shows one night with my wife, and I've investigated a few times. I've bought some gadgets, but I'm not very serious. But I'm watching these shows with my wife, and I go, God, I would love to do that. I would love to travel. I would love to really be locked down in a famously haunted location alone and see what happens. See if I'm really scared. See if is it fake? Is it real? And she goes, well, what's stopping you? I go, I don't know. Knowing how to edit camera. And she's like, buy a camera, learn to edit. I bet she regrets telling me that. So I buy a camera. I talk to a guy at work. Um, and that's sort of the short story of it. But next thing I know, I'm filming locations. I'm editing shows. I'm learning to edit. I'm I've got a new avenue of something to discover and learn. I guess I always want to learn, or
Hmm.
I need to conquer something new. Um,
Well, and I think that's a really good point to make right now. People that are watching or watch it later, is that wrestling was something that you loved, you learned how to do it, and you moved away from it. So now you find something else and you get into the special effects. You learn something new. You love it. You do well with it. You're chasing that next something, and now with the paranormal show and just learning, I think that is something that you find a
yeah,
lot of people, you get to this level, and I know, my wife she goes crazy because as soon as I get to the top of anything, I'm like, okay, what's next? I
yeah,
get to the top of
yeah,
it. What's next? What, like, you can't, and I don't know. I can't even really put my finger on what or why, but
yeah.
I think it's the challenge that I really like, the chase. I do love the thrill of chase. My wife actually tried to dump me like 3 times before we got married. And I think that's what attracted me even more. Um, but so you got this show, right? And you're back wrestling now. Well, not wrestling, but you're back teaching wrestling. And we only have a couple minutes. I neglected to tell you that, but
Oh,
uh, you're back teaching wrestling. And so what is that like coming full circle to like leave this thing that was like so good, became so bad, and now here you are again? Is that kind of like therapy for you in some way?
well, it's like, so I quit the drug. I'm off it. I know she'll never love me again. The wrestling, um, and so it's sort of like, uh, I almost see it. I'm not doing it for me in any way, and that's sort of weird. It's almost. Have you ever heard Arnold's motivation speech? One of his key things is give something back. And I'm
Right,
like, I've been trained by Mad Dog, Bullet Bob Armstrong, Lance Storm, Al Snow, Rip Rogers, Nick Dinsmore, Danny Davis, uh, Greg Gagne. I've had Lance Storm. Did I say Lance Storm? I've had so many trainers. I've had,
right,
and I don't think you understand. A month at OVW wrestling 5 days a week, 7 days a week. That's most indie guys' year.
right,
You know what I mean? Like, a normal indie guy will wrestle, if he's lucky, every month, and we're wrestling sometimes. 20 to 30 matches, practice matches, show matches a week. And
Right.
I did that for like 7 or 8 years. So and other guys that have been through the system I went through know what it's like. Like, yeah, you almost laugh. I don't have to think about wrestling. Like, it's so second nature. Um, so I've got all this shit in my head of wrestling, of what's right and what's wrong, and psychology and moves and all this. And I go, I can't. It's taken up so much of my memory core in my brain. I go, I have to give it to somebody. It'd be
Right.
selfish and it would be wasted if I didn't remember what it was like to be the crazy kid and sort of be the guy I wish I'd met. Um,
Right.
and if I could have met 18-year-old me, the advice I could have given him and stuff I could have told him, um, which no one's like I was. I have not yet met anyone as insane as I was. Um, but it's sort of just to help the kids. I've got all the knowledge. I got to use it. I can't. I know wrestling doesn't love me, so I can't give her too much of my time. But I give them my night and I give them my work. And yeah, it's just to help people who want to learn because I've got it.
Right. Well, I have to say, and if Danny's still watching, I mean, if there's ever anybody that I've known throughout wrestling under you, is Danny would be the closest that comes to that, because he
Yeah.
lives and breathes it. He's there. He's training every day. I see him in the groups too. And you talk about the guys that and girls that they don't really want to train like that. And that's kind of my biggest thing, is that I can't train, so I can't wrestle, right? Like, I
Yeah.
really would love to again. I miss it crazy. I don't. You probably don't miss it the same way that I do, because you had it for so long. But Danny is he's all in. I mean,
Yeah.
Danny is like the Steve Jr. at this point,
Yeah.
in my opinion. And you I always loved when you give him a hard time, but I think that you only give him a hard time because he has that just that little thing, right?
Well, what's the worst thing you can hear is good match. You know what I mean? That means they didn't watch. That means they didn't care.
Right.
The best thing you can hear is a full critique of start to finish. Um, and that's sort of, yeah, I'm definitely hard on Danny because I don't like him. No, but I'm hard, I'm hard on Danny because he works hard. You judge everybody by, some people you just want them to get through the drill and not get hurt because
Right.
that's their skill level and that's where they're at. And then
Yep.
some people, I also do that. There's a lot of guys that'll come that are really good, and I'll throw a critique at them, and they're kind of like, "What?" You know, like, yeah. I mean, if you're here, I will tell you something you might not know. I had somebody that was really good, and I don't know current wrestling, but he might be on TV. But he did a drop kick in class for someone. I go, yeah, bring your knees closer together. And he was like, what? I'm like, well, you might not see it, but I see it. Bring your knees closer together. That's what I was taught. And it makes the drop kick look cleaner. Oh,
Right.
so to give everybody a critique. Um, Danny works really hard, and I'm really proud from the kid that came in to where he is now. And he's not afraid to keep training, which is what you have to do. And there's so many guys. I laugh every week when I say, who's coming to class? And you get, the few people that are interested. Thank you to Phil, who's always there, and Bulletproof, who's always there. Guys like that. But, I can't have a class with Phil and Bulletproof. You have to have a group mentality. There's so many guys. I mean, Friday night's full of guys, but Monday mornings there's no one in training. You know what I mean? Um,
Yeah.
and I think that's different mentality. If they didn't have a Friday show, what would they do? They would
Right.
train more. But I do it. I do it for them. I do it for the kids. And I
Do it
do
for
it.
the kids.
I do it to get no one no one on this level will ever be as critiqued and taught as I've been taught. And I think a lot of guys don't realize that I was in the ring with everyone they're watching now. I've been in the ring with, you know, um, they've slept on my couch. I've shared cars with them, like, and that's who they're slow mowing and wanting to be. So I've been next to them. Utilize me.
Yeah.
So
Well, let me just take this next minute, just kind of help close things out a little bit, and I just wanted to bring you on the show. Number one, just to let everybody hear your story. I think you have an amazing story and a lot. We could probably go on for another hour at least, I'm sure. So maybe we'll do it again another time. But my personal reason for having you on the show is I said that I had two things that I wanted to do when I was a kid. One was and I say a kid, a teenager, I guess, wanted to own a martial arts school, wanted to be a professional wrestler. I don't know that I could say that I was truly a professional wrestler, but I did have the opportunity to get in the ring and live a dream that I never thought would have been possible. And it was because of you making it easy for me to be there, because I've heard horror stories of people going to train and we do it in martial arts too. We weed people out. You don't want them
yeah,
around, you weed them out. And you made it very easy for me to train. You were always, you talk about the positive and the compliment sandwich. You're always really good. I think that even sometimes when I sucked, you would say, "Hey, that was pretty good," and just kind of get that confidence up. I have a martial arts instructor that I've had for 30 plus years and changed my life, right? Well, having the opportunity to be involved in something that I just absolutely loved for even the short period of time that I did it, I just wanted to tell you how much I appreciate you and all that you put into us and how you helped us build Millennium Wrestling Academy, from Bump U to Millennium Wrestling Academy to,
yeah,
where it is now. I really commend you on staying involved in something that probably at one time was not the brightest point of your life. It went from being the best thing in the world to, I just don't want to do this anymore, but you're back in it and you're still, I think that's commendable to give back. I really think that's
yeah.
important. I mean, it's something that I strive to do. So, from me, from all the people that have ever trained with you, you probably don't get a lot of extra love and support and thank yous. So publicly and on video forever and ever, here it is. So thank you, Steve. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much. It means a lot, and I remember. I like I said, I remember your first day, and I also remember. But I remember what people feel like coming to wrestling class for the first day. People come to class, like you said, the other place you left. People come to school scared, and so the first thing I do is a fart joke and a smile to relax people. You know what I mean?
Yep.
If you're coming to hurt people, go to MMA class. We're here to learn the fun show we watch and to be safe. And like I said, I think I said it last week. Every move you do is taking advantage and putting your life in each other's hands. And it's a level of trust and a level of safety and a level of professionalness that you have to have from the start. Because you could drop someone at any time or you could get hurt with any role. And I'm just so glad. I guess in the same way, I don't really. Everyone thinks Steve hates wrestling and blah blah blah. Um, I love my students. I love MPW. I'm gonna get emotional. And I love having a place to pour this wasted knowledge out of my head. It keeps me. It's a weekly reminder of who I was and who I am and how to no matter what I do, wrestling is a part of my life. I'll always have stories that start with when I was wrestling. And without them, I wouldn't have gained the confidence to talk to my wife. I wouldn't have gained the personality I am on ghost hunting. I wouldn't have gained, who I am on stage when I do stand up, which we didn't really get into stand up. So even ghost hunting, which I've been doing so long, I've already
Hmm.
moved past my ghost hunting to start doing stand up.
Yeah.
So I have another thing that I'm trying to conquer on top of this thing I'm trying to conquer. Um, yeah, I guess I love class. I love these guys, and I want them
Well,
to love it back. I want them to come in and show me. I want to see some more passion.
well, do me a favor and talk directly to your class, to the wrestlers that are still working. Some of them may not have the aspirations to go as far or as high as you did. Um, But you mentioned a couple lessons, and I just, for motivational purposes, as everybody's listening to
Yeah.
this, even if they listen to the last 5 minutes, what do you have to say to some of the guys and girls that are wrestling now as they're chasing after a dream?
I heard a great line once that says, an expert practices and practices and practices till they get something right. A professional practices and practices and practices till they can't get it wrong.
Mm,
And that's a big difference. Um, sort of from skateboarding. Skateboarding doesn't make sense. There is no reason someone should get on a skateboard and learn to make it spin and land on it. That's an impossible trick. No one should do that. But if you try hard enough and work long enough, you'll figure it out. Wrestling is not just moves and doing a bunch of arm drags in a row. You don't realize where you're progressing. You're getting where you are accessing every move like a video game, and then you're finally able to tell a story through these moves. And you tell people that is something Al used to do to us. He goes, "The story is you've betrayed you, and now you secretly love this person. Tell me that through fighting." You know what I mean? Like,
hmm
that's what you have to do. And it's like I almost can't get to psychology where it should be because I'm still having to stop and teach hip tosses. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Um, so I'm saying if these more advanced guys that think they get it, I watch your shows every week. You do so many things wrong that you think you're doing right. Not to be the compliment sandwich bad guy. Uh, there are guys that think they got it and they think they're so good and yeah, you're good at doing moves. But if you want the crowd reaction, you know, you have to change a lot. You have to do a lot. Um, I just wish more professional Friday night stars would come to class and see what they don't know. Um,
hmm
and I don't know for the guys who have trained with me and trained with other people, there's a big difference from what I understand um, of just learning moves and learning psychology. So please
Well,
come
I
train
love
with me.
I love that quote. About a professional does it until they can't get it wrong. That's a
Yeah.
big standout. No matter what field you're in, no matter what you're doing, whether it's stand-up comedy, you're doing professional wrestling, you're doing martial arts. The expert will practice to get it right, but the professional will practice until they can't get it wrong. So I'm going to leave it with that. And thank you so much for your time. I think you now have the record of the longest Master Motivation interview. So I will give you that championship right there. So
All right.
thanks for spending time with me. Hang out for a minute. I'm going to play our video on the way out. And guys, if you have any extra comments to drop in there, thank you, Brendan and Danny, for tuning in and
Thank you,
always
guys.
giving back. So we'll see you guys next week. On next Monday, we got Mike Guido coming up, and so many more guests every single Monday for Monday Master Motivation. So thanks again, Steve. We'll
Thank
see you in
you.
just a minute.
See you.